You have felt it. Everyone has. That prickle at the back of your neck when you are completely alone in a room, and somehow you turn around anyway. We are taught that perception requires eyes, that being watched requires a watcher. It is one of the most basic assumptions of human experience. If no one is there, no one can see you. And yet, in empty houses, in dark parking lots, in quiet forests at dusk, millions of people report the exact same sensation. A certainty, almost physical, that something is observing them. No sound, no movement, no evidence at all. Just the feeling. In 1898, a French psychologist wanted to test this feeling directly. He seated volunteers in a room, then quietly stood behind them, sometimes staring, sometimes not, without telling them which. Again and again, people guessed correctly whether they were being watched, at a rate higher than chance should allow. The scientific community was stunned, and then, just as quickly, deeply skeptical. Because here is the problem. If this feeling were real, if humans truly possessed some sixth sense for being observed, it would rewrite everything we understand about biology. So scientists did what scientists do. They tried to break the illusion. For over a century, researchers have run this same experiment in different forms. Subjects sit with their backs to another person. Sometimes that person watches. Sometimes they look away or leave the room entirely, replaced by nothing but silence. The subjects guess. And when the trials are controlled properly, when every subtle cue is removed, the accuracy collapses to pure chance. So the sixth sense appears to be an illusion. But that raises a stranger question. If nothing is actually detecting the gaze, why does the feeling persist? Why does it feel so real? The answer begins somewhere unexpected. Inside the architecture of your own eyes. Human peripheral vision is remarkably sensitive to movement and shape. Even when you are not consciously looking at something, your brain is constantly processing shadows, silhouettes, reflections, and shifting light at the very edge of your visual field, long before that information ever reaches conscious awareness. Most of the time, this happens instantly and gets dismissed as irrelevant. But occasionally, your visual system flags something, a shape that might be a person, a shadow that could be movement. And instead of showing you a clear image, it delivers something else. A feeling. An alarm without a picture. This is where the story could end. A simple case of misfiring perception. But it does not end there, because the feeling of being watched is far too consistent, far too universal to be explained by eyesight alone. Evolutionary biologists point to something older than vision itself, older than the human species. For nearly all of our evolutionary history, humans were not always the apex predator. We were, quite often, prey. And prey animals that failed to detect a hidden predator did not survive long enough to pass on that failure. Which means natural selection may have quietly rewarded paranoia. Not the destructive kind, the useful kind. A nervous system tuned to assume danger first and verify later, because the cost of a false alarm was minor. But the cost of missing a real predator was death. In a world of tall grass and dense tree lines, where a lion or a rival tribe might be watching from cover, the ones who felt watched and reacted outlived the ones who did not. If that theory holds, then the feeling crawling up your spine in an empty parking garage is not superstition. It is inheritance. A signal broadcast from ancestors who never met you, but who needed you to survive long enough to exist. Still, this explains why the feeling might exist in dangerous, ambiguous environments. It does not fully explain why you feel watched in your own bedroom at 2 a.m, with the door locked and nobody there at all. For that, neuroscience points somewhere deeper still, into a small, almond-shaped structure buried near the center of the brain called the amygdala. This is the region most closely tied to fear and threat detection, and it does something unsettling. It can trigger a threat response before the rational, conscious parts of your brain have even finished processing what triggered it. In practice, this means your body can react to danger before you consciously understand why. The racing heartbeat? The held breath? The certainty of being seen. All of it can arrive first, explanation arriving late, if it arrives at all. You do not decide to feel watched. Your brain decides for you and hands you the sensation as a finished product. No further questions permitted. There is one more layer, and it is perhaps the strangest of all. Researchers studying anxiety and isolation have found that the feeling of being watched intensifies dramatically during extended solitude, sensory deprivation, and sleep paralysis. In these states, the brain, starved of normal external input, appears to generate its own signals of presence. People in isolation chambers, polar explorers cut off for months, even mountaineers alone at extreme altitude, have independently reported the same phenomenon, an unmistakable sense of another being nearby, watching, sometimes even guiding them. Scientists call it the felt presence effect, and it remains only partially understood. Some researchers suspect it relates to how the brain maintains a model of your body in space, and what happens when that model briefly glitches under extreme stress or isolation, projecting a second presence that does not exist. Others believe it is tied to the same predator detection circuitry, simply firing without any external trigger to calibrate it. Both explanations are plausible. Neither is proven. And that gap between what we can measure and what people actually experience is where this mystery still lives. What makes this feeling so hard to dismiss is that it does not behave like an error. Errors tend to be random, inconsistent, easily reasoned away. This feeling is not that. It returns in the same conditions, to different people, across different cultures, different eras, different corners of the earth, all describing something almost identical, despite never comparing notes. Perhaps that is the real answer hiding beneath all the neuroscience and evolutionary theory. Not that something is watching you, but that somewhere inside you is a far older self, one that spent hundreds of thousands of years assuming it was being watched, because that assumption, more often than not, kept it alive. You may never again feel that prickle on your neck the same way, because the next time it happens, you will know the truth is stranger than either explanation alone. It is not your imagination betraying you, and it is not evidence of anything supernatural in the room. It is something quieter and, in its own way, more remarkable. A warning system inherited across thousands of generations, still running in the background of a mind that no longer lives in the wild, still whispering the same ancient message it always has. You are never truly alone. Not because someone is there, but because something inside you refuses to stop watching for them.